Legal and non-legal methods had great effect when responding to the use of capital punishment. Capital punishment is a highly debated topic. Though most members of our society believe the death penalty is primitive and unconstitutional, some still believe in its ability to give justice and reduce crime, making these two of the few rights with extreme debate. Capital punishment is in direct violation of the UNDHR Article 3, the right to life, liberty, and security of person, and Article 5, the right to live free from torture or cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment. Regardless of this debate, we must recognize the fact that this is a human right and should be treated as such. Some argue that it deters crime, but 88% of top criminologists surveyed in America state that it does not deter murder. Some say that it is less expensive than keeping people in prison, but is in fact up to 10 times more expensive than an entire life in prison. Though some countries refuse to change, many countries have recognized these facts and have repealed the death penalty. England is one of the best examples of this, as legal and non-legal methods were extremely effective in guiding its society towards what is right through their responses to capital punishment. The death penalty has been a prescribed punishment for an extremely long time. In fact, the earliest records of capital punishment date back to 18th century BC. It is fair to say that England pretty much wrote the book on the death penalty. I mean, they used to boil people alive. Far out. But despite this, their public is strongly against capital punishment. To truly understand what brought them to this point, we need to go back about 200 years ago. The death penalty was punishment for most crimes. Then during the 1830s, there was a large movement of people believing that punishments should suit the crime. And so the laws punishable by death decreased rapidly. Executions started being performed inside prisons, and in 1868 the last public execution in England was performed. For a long time, most of the British public were quite happy with their usage of the death penalty, until the 1950s. Soon after the Universal Declaration of Human Rights had been published, the public reopened the debate about the use of this penalty. This debate was exacerbated by the high media coverage of cases like Ruth Ellis, a blonde model murderer, and Derek Bentley. Derek Bentley had not committed murder, but allegedly shouted, "Let him have it," moments before a police officer was shot by Christopher Craig. Craig was a minor escaping the death penalty, but even though Bentley had not committed the murder, his shouting solidified guilt, making him a party to murder, which was a felony charge. He was executed on the 28th of January 1953, only 19 at the time. The Murder, Abolition of Death Penalty Act was passed in 1965. This reformed the mandatory sentencing of murder from the death penalty to life imprisonment. After this, there was still serious debate as to the use of it. Many still believed it should be used. The cases of the Birmingham 6, Guildford 4, Maguire 7, and similar cases changed these thoughts drastically. These people were wrongly convicted of pub bombings in their associated cities. Had the death penalty been in place at the time, they would have been executed. But due to the overturning of their cases and the reforms in law, they were set free, safe and sound. This change in English law was followed by most of Europe. Countries like France and Germany followed soon after. And by the end of the 1970s, most of Europe had abolished the death penalty. In this situation, the legal responses to adapting human values and a growing understanding of human rights were highly effective in protecting these developing rights. This situation also displays how the media is one of the most effective non-legal measures to protecting human rights. It did this by strong coverage of important cases and by swaying public opinion of the death penalty. Just one of these media sources was the Evening News, which published an article called "Youth of 19 is Accused of Murdering PC." The swing caused by these articles contributed greatly to and was highly effective in influencing the changes in law, which were, as stated, extremely effective in protecting human rights. Another one of the non-legal methods displayed in this case was the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It was extremely influential during the 1950s in informing people of their rights and supported governments to change towards a better society. The increase in public awareness was influenced by many sources, but the UDHR was extremely influential outside of social boundaries. In the courtroom, in the parliament, the UDHR is influencing decisions made. This is why soon after its publication, almost all of Europe repealed capital punishment. And so in England we saw a great change from it being used as punishment for most crimes to it being abolished completely. This change was influenced by changes in social values, the UDHR, and the media. The change itself was an extremely important legal move in support of human rights. The case study of England is a perfect representation of what happened throughout most of Europe and the Americas. Unfortunately, most of Asia and the Middle East still commit this atrocity. We see organizations like Amnesty International and the International Commission Against Death Penalty trying to affect its use. But it's hard to influence the decisions made in many circumstances due to things like state sovereignty. The main issue is that some countries do not publish their exact numbers. Countries like China are believed to execute people in the thousands, but we have no way of knowing because it's completely hidden. Luckily, because most of the world does not support the death penalty, it has become more difficult to secure ingredients for lethal injection. This forces countries to return to more primitive methods, like hanging and firing squads.
Now to more breaking news from Utah, where convicted murderer Ronnie Lee Gardner was shot to death by a firing squad overnight. It was the first execution of its kind in the United States in 14 years, and it was not without controversy.
This controversy can lead to extreme changes in social values. This often means a change in political stance. And so by forcing the government to do something controversial, we can change social values. This is an extremely effective way in which countries can influence other countries to change legislation and reduce the use of the death penalty. Despite many issues and drawbacks to how human rights are protected, the case of capital punishment in England shows that we can change. And though some countries may be unwilling, there are many methods that can and are being used to drive change. This demonstrates that the legal and non-legal measures taken are extremely effective in response to this particular human rights violation.